After months of digging through specs, crunching numbers, and weighing all the options, we finally made our decision. We're repowering our 78-foot yacht Tangaroa with a pair of Cummins 6.7s. We looked at everything from Volvo to Yanmar to Cat, even considered Duramax. But in the end, Cummins just made sense for us. It wasn't just about price, though that was a big factor. There were 5 key reasons we went this route. And if you're curious what pushed us over the edge, keep watching.
If you caught our last video, you'll remember that we calculated out somewhere in the range of 250 horsepower per engine to push this boat through the water with a safety factor. Now, we looked at various engines and we're kind of looking for something in the 7-liter range and a turbo diesel, electronic. And there were a few options out there. There were Caterpillars, Yanmars, Volvos, man, the list goes on, FPTs. Well, we kind of didn't go with any of those. We, at the end, chose, because it fits our budget and because I like to play with things, we chose a Cummins 6.7 liter, but not the QSB. We ended up picking a 2012 Dodge truck engine. Reason number 1, we've got price. Price is probably the most important of all of the things that people think about when they're buying a new engine. Now, comparison, we got like Cat C7s, 20 to 30,000 US dollars. We got Volvo D6s, 20 to 30,000 dollars. We got Yanmars, 20 to 30,000 dollars per engine. That adds up really quick. I can get a pair of rebuildable 2012 Dodge truck engines for 10,000 Canadian. Let that sink in. That is a huge price difference. Like, we got something to work with here. Reason number 2, and also super critical for us, fuel efficiency. Now, a lot of people say, oh, you're never going to make back what you save in fuel efficiency when you do an engine repower. Whether or not that's true, I can't say. We still need the range. Now, you can't replace range. Like, it's in there. So if we can gain 25% on an engine on fuel efficiency, we're gaining 25% more range on that. And regardless of whether or not it will pay for the repower, that's a pretty big change. Now, a road-going 6.7 Cummins engine they're not known for perfect fuel economy. There's a lot of emissions on there that does pull back that number quite a bit. But the marine engines are actually pretty good. For a reference, a Gardner engine. I mean, these things are known for legendary fuel efficiency. BSFC, so brake specific fuel consumption, how much fuel they use for how much power they generate, is somewhere in around 0.325 pounds per horsepower per hour. Just to convert that over to fuel burn, that's about 2.78 gallons per hour at our cruise speed. So that's pretty good. Now that's per engine, so we'd have to double that, but you get the point. A modern Cummins 6.7 QSB, which is the marine version of the 6.7 liter engines, they produce roughly around 0.33 pounds per horsepower per hour. Not a lot of difference there between the Gardners and the new Cummins. That factors out to about 2.82 gallons per hour. Now, that's 0.04 of a gallon per hour difference between the engines that are known for legendary fuel consumption to a modern Cummins QSB engine. Not bad. You might ask, you don't have a Cummins QSB 6.7, you have a Dodge Truck 2012 engine. That's gonna change a bit. Fortunately for us, the 6.7 liter Cummins truck engines and the 6.7 liter QSB marine engines are based on the same architecture. So all these parts can be shifted and moved around to make an engine that works for us. Reason number 3, parts availability. We're going to be traveling the world starting July 7th, and we have to be able to get parts places. You need parts. Every engine needs parts, regardless of what engine it is. Cummins 6.7, they're everywhere. They're one of the most common engines produced, and you can get anything for everything. Say I needed a water pump. I don't have to go to a Finning or Caterpillar dealer or whatever. I can go to Lordco, that's our Canadian O'Reilly's or AutoZone, and I can get a water pump for a 2012 Dodge truck engine. And that's pretty much everywhere. I mean, especially North America. It's available all over. And not only that, it's cheaper. Like trying to get parts for a Volvo or a Cat or any of those marine engines, you're paying out of the nose for them. It doesn't matter what it is, they're all expensive. This is a good option for us. Now, not only are the parts readily available and cheap, we don't need a lot of them. These are simple engines. There's not a lot of parts that bolt to this. I can carry spares for this. I can carry almost a spare part for every part on that engine short of the engine block. And it's not that many. So, I mean, how much space do injectors take up or high pressure pumps? It's just easy. There's just not a lot of stuff there. Reason number 4, they're quiet. Now, mechanical injected engines, they're pretty simple, right? And that's one of the biggest things that a lot of the people in the comments are touting. Simple. Mechanical engines are simple. Yes, they are. The way they work is they have an injection pump. That injection pump times all of the injectors and feeds the high pressure to each injector. The injectors are just dumb. They just sit there and open up whenever they see pressure. Now, that is simple. The injection pump controls the how much. It also controls when. And typically there's no adjustment for when. You're getting the injection happening at this time and it controls how much. Fast forward a few years and we've got companies that have developed the electronically controlled unit injector. And this is similar to what the Detroits had in them as far as the injector style. It's a camshaft driven injector. Each cylinder has its own, so there's no main injection pump. They all do their own work. And then they've added a solenoid to that. So what that solenoid has allowed them to do is now have some control of the when. So now you've got an injector that does how much and when to inject the fuel. And this helped a fair bit on efficiency, power, startup, things like that. Just having that ability to control your timing as well. Now we get to the Cummins 6.7 and all modern common rail injected engines. You've got kind of a combination of the two. You've got an injection pump that builds pressure. You've got injectors that just open up electronically. And that gives a really special benefit. This allows us to not only control how much fuel, when to inject the fuel, but how many times we can inject that fuel at each combustion stroke. Now, engineers are pretty smart. And what they figured out was that if they made a little injection right before the main injection event, it smoothed out the engine. And what that does is it kind of pre-ignites the fuel before the main injection event, and it prevents the big pressure spikes when that main injection event hits without affecting the overall average of that cylinder pressure. So you're not losing any power off of it, but that signature diesel rattle is now much reduced or gone in some circumstances. Another benefit of the common rails these days, so the new electronic engines, is injection pressure. These things handle immense amounts of pressure. So that little, on ours, CP3 injection pump creates 25 to 30,000 PSI. It doesn't do that all the time. It ranges in the engine operation. But in comparison, the old 12V71 engines that we had, typical injection pressure was around 2,500 to 3,000 pounds. So considerably less. Now, injection pressure is typically hand in hand with efficiency as well. So for example, 12V71 engines, they really don't like to start when cold. They're grumpy, just really unhappy when they get cold. The common rails, I think they're, say for example, your 12V71 engines, when you're turning them over to start, they're not generating a lot of pressure. They're generating enough to get running. And then once they're running, they'll start building more pressure. The common rails, they don't even attempt to start until they exceed 4,000 PSI. So quick startups, relatively smoke-free. I mean, you're always going to get a bit of smoke on a cold diesel, but fairly smoke-free. It clears up quickly and they operate smoke-free. Just all super benefits for what we're after. Reason number 5, simplicity. Now, everybody I'm sure is going to be, oh, it's an electronic engine, it's not simple. Let's just for a moment take all of those electronics and move them away. You have an inline 6-cylinder engine, 1 camshaft, 4 valves per head, push rods, like it's a basic engine. I mean, if you were to compare this to a gasoline engine, it's about the simplest engine that you could possibly imagine. Now the Detroit, even though it was 2-stroke, it still had 2 camshafts, it still had 4 valves per cylinder, it still had rockers, it still had all the same things, just a ton more of them. Not only that, huge amount more places to leak from. I mean, if you compare a gasket set from a Cummins 6.7 liter to a gasket set from a 12V71, and I'm talking the full, complete overhaul gasket set, it is bonkers the amount of gaskets and seals that those 12V71s used. Now onto the mechanicals again, everything's easy to change. Water pump is very accessible and tiny. The oil pump, very easy to get to. Doing one of those in situ would probably take me maybe 2 hours, and that's probably being conservative. It's the only thing that you have to get into the bottom of the engine for is changing main bearings if you had an oil pickup tube come loose, and sadly the lifters. However, a 3,000 RPM diesel engine, lifters are going to last for a very long time. On that note, this is one thing that I would like to give the Detroits a nod for. They used roller lifters, which I was actually quite impressed to see when I had them torn down. They're obviously going to last longer as far as lifters go. So yes, that is a nod to the Detroits. However, like I said, not going to be an issue. So now we have this fairly simple mechanical engine. Let's bring back in all those electronics. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I've been dealing with electronic engines for coming on 2 decades now. I've done a lot of design, building, installations, tuning, a lot. And one thing that I've come to learn is modern electronics are not unreliable. Sure, you're gonna have problems. You're gonna have problems with anything at some point. And if you look at the sheer mass of how many electronic engines are out there, not that many failures by the sheer amount. So let's look at the components of that. You got sensors. On these engines, there are 3 sensors that are absolutely critical to the function of the engine. Now, there are other sensors that are needed for other reasons, but just to make the engine run, there's 3 sensors. You've got a crankshaft sensor, you've got a rail pressure sensor, and then you've got a throttle sensor. So basically, crankshaft sensor tells the ECU that the engine's running. Rail pressure sensor allows the engine to control the rail pressure because, like I said, these things run huge rail pressure, so you have to be able to maintain that. And then it has to know how much throttle you're giving it. That's pretty much it. I may have missed some simple ones, but no, that's pretty much all you need to make these run. Everything else is just extras. Coolant temp sensors, air temp sensors. While they are critical for keeping the engine alive, they are not required to make the engine run. Therefore, say we're out and I have a sensor failure, it's not gonna be the end of the day. I can get around that. I can still make the engine run. And you know, this isn't gonna be for everybody. I know these engines, I know fuel injection, I know how all this stuff works, I know how to get around it. However, I always go back to, for our uses, this is a great engine. Now, you've got the ECU, or the computer, or the brain box, some of you may call it. These are actually fairly simple pieces of electronics. I mean, I deal with engines in the gasoline sector that are turning 9,000 RPM, sometimes even more. That's a lot of processing power. There's 4 camshafts that all are moving around. I mean, pretty complicated stuff. And the ECUs have to be able to control that. So now I'm taking all this benefit of all this modern technology and I'm applying it to an engine that spins at 3,000 RPM, has nothing really special for actuators short of a rail pressure control solenoid. It's, in my opinion, dead simple. So if I keep a set of sensors on board, an ECU on board, and probably a high pressure pump as a spare, and a set of injectors as a spare, that's all I need for the electronic side of things. And these are all things that are very small to keep and easy to replace. None of them take any particularly long amount of time to get swapped out and get up and running again. All right, now bonus reason, I freaking love electronic engines. I have for years. I love tuning and I love wiring and I love integration capabilities of electronic engines. There are just so many possibilities, from, integrating them into my engine fans, so the engine fans automatically come on when the engines come on. Sure, you can do that with mechanical diesels too, but not like I can do it with an electronic engine and an ECU. I can run them into stabilizer systems. I can do transmission control with them. It's just so many options with these engines that just benefit me, and I just really enjoy. A lot of reasons why we chose these engines, but I am going to go into some of the downsides. For starters, fuel sensitivity. Common rail engines are incredibly sensitive to fuel. They cannot have contamination. They cannot have water in the fuel. Very bad things happen, from failures of high pressure pumps to injectors blowing tips off. Typically, like the 12V71 engines, they can survive a bit. Matter of fact, had a guy once tell me they could run on owl piss. I'm inclined to believe him. But can't have that with the common rail 6.7s. We're gonna have to tackle the fuel system and make sure that stuff is right up to snuff. Probably the biggest con, they require power. If we're out and we have some sort of a power failure, that could potentially put an engine down. Fortunately, we've got lots of power redundancy for everything, so that's likely not going to be a problem. And we also carry tons of spares for that. I think at this point I've got 2 spare ECUs, I'll have a spare injector set. So even if we have a lightning strike, things go down, I should be able to get us back up and running again. And I'm also toying around with ideas on how to make our mechanical genset engines drive some sort of a get-home propulsion. Now, the chances of losing power for multiple redundant systems is pretty slim. However, the reason why I always have it on my mind is when I was young, our family had a sailboat down in Mississippi, and we used to go sail the Gulf of Mexico. And at the time, we were at the dock, and there was a storm coming in. And my bed was about 3 feet away from the mast, and it was late at night, and I was in bed sleeping, and the whole boat lit up. We got struck by lightning, and I distinctly remember all of the electronic devastation that happened after that. Every piece of electronics on that boat was fried. So that kind of thing tends to stay in your mind when you live on a boat. Not sure what kind of effect the metal hull would have. Hopefully it's a Faraday cage of some sort. But yes, it's always something that is at the top of my head, and will probably be something that will always make me nervous when we're out at sea. And the last con is we're going to need new transmissions as well. Like I told in the last video there on the prop curves, 2-to-1 transmissions are not going to do it for a 6.7 liter turbo diesel in this application. So we're going to need to get some transmissions to go with our new engines. So more expensive for us. So electronic engines, we've decided, are a very good option for us. They do everything we need them to do. We enjoy them. 2 thumbs up. However, you're probably asking, but they're not marine engines, they're truck engines. How are you guys going to make those work in a boat? We're going to get into that in the next video, so don't miss it.
If you missed last week's video, check out We Need to Repower a 78-foot Yacht. Now what? It's where we break down all the numbers, options, and planning that led us to choose the Cummins 6.7s. It sets the stage for everything we're doing today. She's such a pretty boat.